Ladies and gentlemen, the LinkedIn podcast is back. I tried to carry the load by myself, but I realized that I'm not I'm not LeBron James with the 2007 Cavaliers, so wasn't happening, bro. So I had to bring back my man Lindy to the show, man, and we're excited to be doing this show again. We're excited to be talking about the Eagles and everything that we have to do. And also we have the gauntlet that's going to be coming up at 8, so make sure you guys stay tuned for that. But what's up, Lindy, man? How you been? How's everything been going?
The return is absolutely real. Quite the
100%.
anticipation leading up to this moment, buddy. So it's good to be it's just good to be doing this again.
Yeah, man, we've been kind of out of the action. There's been a lot of things happening with the Eagles during the off season. Obviously, Jalen Hurts contract extension. You had a bunch of
Mhm.
guys leave the team. You had some people resigned. You had drama with Darius Slay. He ended up coming back. All kinds of stuff that we haven't got chance to talk about yet. So, what are your thoughts on everything that's gone up to this point? And we'll get into some of the other things that we're gonna have on the show. But when you look at what's happened last few months, how do you feel about the Eagles right now?
I mean, it's seriously been quite the carousel, and it's just a great example of watching NFL over the years and realizing how difficult it is to maintain such a top-notch roster
Hmm.
that Philadelphia has been able to do ever since that meltdown of 2020 to go from the highest to highs, winning the Super Bowl in 17, to the lowest of lows and the demise of Carson Wentz and the collapse that 2020 was, and all those questions about the infamous Jalen Hurts selection in the second round. And we got
A
quite
lot of
the
drama.
justification for that this offseason, and it was far and well deserved. And we'll get into that. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
been quite the carousel.
Let's go ahead and get it right into it. Jalen Hurts this offseason signing the deal, 5 years, $255 million. Uh, Very well deserved contract. We know what he did for the team last season, leading the team to the Super Bowl, having a very good season two. Really showed a lot of improvement. So, what are your thoughts on Jalen Hurts being the guy and the team committing to him long term? Was this the right decision?
Well, certainly it was well deserved after the regular season he had really kind of
Mhm.
up against a considerable amount. Him starting off his starting tenure with a brand new head coach, um, a lot of different, a lot of different faces in that coaching staff, and they tried to bring some familiarity in with Brian Johnson as his quarterbacks coach, who is now the new offensive coordinator, and starting from the very beginning, the journey that Hertz has had, and him being able to maintain and build, develop, and grow into the leadership role that he has displayed throughout 2022. Um, there was a lot of questions. I think there was a lot of decent questions that remained after the 2021 season, but uh, as we talked about to open the show, a lot of those were certainly answered. Again, this was well deserved based on his performance and all things considered, not even including the Super Bowl, which
Mhm.
I'm trying not to relive that personally because it's still
I
such
mean,
a massive
it
focal
was such a
point.
wasted performance by Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts carried the team. The defense didn't show up. I didn't add this to the show topics, but since it's already been brought up, what about Jonathan Gannon, man? How do you feel about all the stuff that's been said about this guy, saying that he was offered the job allegedly after the NFC Championship, or so the Cardinals pretty much without really offering the job, basically offered him the job without officially offering it to him. You know what I mean? So you have all this stuff going on, and it all the stuff that we heard about Gannon and doing all this stuff. I actually, I actually kind of have to believe it because if you look at the game, there was no adjustments made. Period. Like the exact same defense that you played in the first half was the same defense in the second half, and you got fooled by the exact same play with a wide receiver going to motion multiple times in the game. So they just flipped the field and did the play on the other side. That's all. That's the only thing that was different about it. So as far as Jonathan Cannon, I can't really say that I'm surprised.
It's almost as if his entire play call sheet was just rush the quarterback and play zone, because really, and this isn't me taking away somebody's intelligence or whatnot, and there was a lot of similarities to the way Gannon likes to run his defense and the way Jim Schwartz liked to run his defense, and you know Vic Fangio product, this,
I
that,
think
and
it's
the
kind of
third.
disrespectful to Jim Schwartz. I mean,
Uh,
I feel like Jim, if he had more talent the way that Gannon did, I think it would have been a different result.
yeah, well, I mean, between both Super Bowls, Schwartz's defense and Gannon's defense both gave up 30 plus points. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, call it disrespect on it if you will, but it's tough because I feel a lot of it has to do with Gannon being a product of the amount of talent that Eagles defense had last season to put up the amount of sacks that they did in historical fashion, and for how tenacious they were as a defensive unit, especially with that front four, how they were able to rotate, taking a lot of that stress off of the secondary. They can play up close, be aggressive, force a bunch of interceptions. The way CJ Gardner Johnson played, Slay was in there, Bradbury was in there. A lot of stress that it took off of them. And then you get to the Super Bowl, and I understand the turf conditions were a huge factor. They were a factor in that. But at the same time, it's not much of an excuse because the Kansas City Chiefs played on the exact same field. So, it's the entire game was a tough pill to swallow. And despite the negativity surrounding what we know about Jonathan Gannon and the loss as a whole, and I know all the people bringing up that Hurts wasn't imperfect because of the fumble. The fumble didn't matter to me at the end of the day because the quarterback literally put the game right back on his back and marched out there to tie
Such
the
a great
game.
game by him, man.
I mean,
I
what
just
what
remember
more what
the
more
play
could you have
that
asked from Hurts?
more so than any play in the game, the 2-point conversion play where he just was not going to be taken down on that play no matter
Denied,
what. He
no,
knew that he was
no.
going to get in there and get the 2 points.
I mean, look at all the other third down conversions. Most of them were third and medium, third and long, and he's just knocking them out with excellent passes to Goddard and hitting Devontae Smith. Um,
Yeah.
there was that scramble on 4th and 5 where he this close to getting tackled. It was just an unbelievable game, and going back going back through it, seeing how much Hertz was given in terms of the contractual situation. His cap hit for this year is $6.1 million. For as much money as he got, we're going into this year with his cap hit of 6.1 million. And that's when it starts to accumulate over the
Yeah.
next
The
couple of
structure is
years.
laid
But
out really well. He gives the
my
team
goodness,
flexibility to make moves. which is what I think Jalen Hurts wanted. So they figured out a way that they could still do that and improve the team and bring in players and do stuff like that while still giving Jalen Hurts the money that he earned and deserved. So I really think the contract was just kind of a
Yeah.
win-win for both sides.
And I had to research it a little bit, and shockingly enough, his 2022 season was very similar to Lamar's MVP year in 2019. Hertz had more.
Yeah.
Hertz had more total all-purpose yards between rushing and passing. But I think where they start to differ is, well, Hertz I think was a little more careful with the football. I think
Yeah, he is.
they actually may have had the same, excuse me, they may have had the same amount of interceptions, but where I think the comparison stops is Lamar was a lot more efficient in terms of QBR, where it was 83 to 66. And Lamar also threw more passing touchdowns. He had 36
Yeah.
to Jalen's 22, but you take into account the rushing touchdowns, Hertz adds another 13, and the quarterback sneak ones, and they're still going to count. I don't care. He has to get himself in the end zone along with his teammates helping him. But I digress.
They got
Uh,
touchdowns. They got points on the board.
yeah,
So
the touchdown difference was only either 6 or 7. I think Lamar had 43 total that year. Hertz came in and added either 35 or 36 total. But all in all, for the ones that talk about Hertz being the running back cliche that we hear, that Lamar went through the same criticisms. Well, Hurts this past season had more passing yards than Lamar did in his MVP year, where he rushed for over 1,200 yards. So, I mean, you take of that what you will, but to justify the contract and how well Hurts played last season compared to Lamar's MVP year, I'm perfectly fine with it. You already have the character aspect behind it and everything. He's such a fantastic leader, and everybody talks about the aura he brings with his presence in the locker room. DeAndre Swift,
it certainly does.
our recent acquiree out of the draft, was talking about the exact same thing. Any one of his teammates can attest to a similar means of the leadership that Hertz possesses, and you can't ask for a better person to be at the top of that, you know, of of that team when it comes to
Yeah.
being the quarterback.
Yeah. Yeah. And everything you said is true. He's the right guy to represent the franchise. He's the right guy that likes to lead the team and wants to be hungry to get better. I don't think that
Hmm.
even if they would have won the Super Bowl, I really don't think that he still would have been satisfied. I think that
No.
he wanted to win it again. And I think that he's gonna put a strong effort in this season. And the Eagles have a good team. Team's just as good as it was last year. And we'll get into like some of the additions and stuff and some of the guys that walked later on in the show. But personally, I think that as long as he's here and he's got a good team around him, you look at the NFC, you got the 49ers that are a great team. I think the 49ers are probably the greatest competition in the NFC, but there's not really that many threats standing in your way to get back to the Super Bowl. So I think they're going to have a great chance. I think it's good. I think it's a good contract. I think it was laid out very well. So let's move on. We got to talk about the upcoming Eagles schedule and some of the games that we're looking
Hmm.
forward to seeing. Lindy, do you have any games on the schedule? I'm sure that both of us have seen the schedule already since yesterday when it came out. What games are you looking forward to seeing?
I would include um, the game with us heading to Tampa, but Tom Brady's no longer the quarterback, so I thought that was a extra nugget that I could put in there. But I mean, nonetheless, we'll see how Kyle Trask does for the Buccaneers. But obviously you have to look forward to Monday Night Football, going to Arrowhead against the Chiefs, the
Huge game.
rematch of the Super Bowl. That's a given. For how much ish the 49ers fans have been talking, and the and the Debo
Debo.
Samuels of the world, for as much as they have been talking, of course, December 3rd is scheduled on your calendar. So
Yes,
that's
sir.
number two. So aside from those two big ones that are kind of a given, I think the next two. I think the next two we'll throw against the Giants on Christmas Day, which is an awesome one. Um, my
Mhm.
under the radar, my under the radar game that I'll probably include, and I think the Bills are another good one. But the next one I would probably have to put up that I would look forward to seeing is Week 15 against the Seahawks. Um,
Yeah.
who thought who was expecting Seattle to be good last year for what they went through, and then the emergence and revitalizing of Geno Smith's career and how well he played for them, and a lot of that fire being sparked again, and in the hearts of Seattle they're that they were looking at a playoff caliber team once more. So I think that's easily a team that's on the rise. And we were just talking about the NFC, and especially how the draft panned out for that conference. I think the level of competition is definitely going to increase come this season, and that's one of my dark horse games to watch.
I think that's a good choice. I think Seattle has also really improved their team in the offseason too. I mean,
Hmm.
last year you had Woolen, who was like a fifth round pick that was a great corner. And then the most shocking thing of the draft to me was when they took Witherspoon with the top
Yeah.
five pick. I thought they were going to take Jalen Carter, who ended up going to the Eagles. So I was like, wow, that move just kind of blew me away a little bit. But I also see what Seattle's trying to do. Seattle had
Legion of
a
Boom
lot of
2.0.
success when they built a strong secondary,
Mm-hmm.
and they saw an opportunity to do that and then draft, and that's what they did. And then you get Smith Njigba from Ohio State. You got a really good receiver trio. They got DK and Tyler Lockett. So you know what? As good as 49ers are, I still think they're favorites in the NFC West. Seattle's going to be a good team. They're going to be a good team, and they're going to give San Francisco a hard time in their division, and they're going to give some other teams a hard time, I think, too. So I actually do think it's a good choice. But the obvious answer for me is the San Francisco game. I mean, Debo Samuel. It would be one thing if he had an interview and he said all this stuff and he just got it out the way. The guy was at the Super Bowl. I remember when Sideline Sports, all of us were in Arizona. I actually saw Debo when he was walking around on Radio Row, and he did an interview with SiriusXM and some of these other bigger outlets. I saw him walking around. He gets on there and he says all this stuff about James Bradbury's trash. The Eagles stink. They're gonna get exposed in the Super Bowl. Blah 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 blah. Said all this stuff then. So I was like, okay, whatever. Like they just lost the NFC Championship. He's mad. It's whatever. And then I actually forgot about it. And then whatever happened like a few weeks ago, whenever it was, the stuff about my most hated team is the Eagles. The fans will never shut up. Blah blah blah. Like he just cannot stop talking about the Eagles, no matter what he does. Even if you lose the NFC Championship, even if you lose a playoff game and it sucks and your season's over, you gotta at some point you gotta move on to the next season. It's like 4 or 5 months that's removed of that game. And we actually just finished with the draft. So we're pretty much just sitting around waiting for training camp and, preseason to get here so we can move into the next phase, getting closer to NFL season. So the fact that he keeps talking about it and he keeps trying to hype it up, I just don't know if this is what he wants to do. I don't know if this is what you want to do, man. You don't want to give any Philadelphia fans the reason to want to come after you when you come in back into this house, because the fans are definitely going to be letting him hear stuff. So I don't know, Debo. I don't know if this is something that you want to do, bro. So I'm thinking that the 49ers game, that's my most anticipated game of the year, although the Chiefs game is going to be a great game. The Bills, the Dolphins, the Jets. There's so many good teams on the schedule that they're going to be playing.
Yeah.
So all the stuff from last year about you didn't play anybody and all the stuff, people aren't going to be able to say that next year. So they'll have to find another reason to be a hater and not give the Eagles any credit.
And then we turn around and end up getting the strongest schedule, strongest strength.
Number one strength of schedule.
Yep. it was mentioned in the chat. The Arizona, the Cards going to be a big game. No, there's already water in that one.
Did Ritz say that? He said, I think Arizona is a big game. All considers there. I hope we torch the hell out of them. I mean, it's not going to be a big game. It's not going to be blood in the water. Yeah. No. I'm pretty sure we know what's going to happen in that game, especially after all the stuff like me and Lenny were talking about at the beginning of the show with Gannon. I actually think that a lot of the players are they might not say it publicly, but just imagine what some of the guys in the locker room probably feel about that, about a guy that potentially sold the Super Bowl because he already had a job lined up. Like, you think Brandon Graham and all these people, Fletcher Cox, Darius Slay, James Bradbury, all these guys are not pissed off about that? I think they are. I think they will be. And I think that the Cardinals are just going to get their asses kicked, if you want to know the truth. So, Cardinals, I don't know. Gannon, I don't really see him as a guy that is going to be able to command a locker room for the long term. So I think when it comes to Arizona, I will not be surprised if he does not last very long as the head coach. Maybe a couple years, maybe within the next, I would say 3 to 4 years. I think the Cardinals will be looking for another coach.
Look how up and down it was for Cliff Kingsbury there. And,
I just don't think he's head coach material.
I would have to. I'm gonna give a little bit of credit where credit is due here, because people can take of this what you will, because it's not the case anymore. He's not on the Eagles, but I do remember on occasion, from time to time, it has been said that a lot of people viewed Jonathan as a good players, like coach for the players, a players coach. However, we already had that kind of figure in our head coach, who is the same head coach that got laughed at and ridiculed at his introductory press conference. And, well, look how he built his resume already. And so there you go. Gannon's got quite the uphill battle against him right now. And come that matchup when Philly has to play the Cards, well, I think the team is going to be the proverbial punching bag for the head coach. So let's hope he does not get in the way, because he'll pay for it.
So yeah, guys, that's the most anticipated games for the season. Moving on, we got to talk about some of the guys that has gone, some of the guys that have came back, and for the guys that did leave, the replacements that's going to be coming into place. So Obviously, some of the biggest losses of the season: CJ Gardner Johnson, TJ Edwards, Javon Hargrave. Probably the biggest three names that the team lost. But some of the guys that they brought in, obviously, I forgot about Miles Sanders.
How quickly we forget.
But it's kind of crazy how everything has kind of happened. And you know that in the NFL, it's hard to keep guys. It's hard to keep the same team together. You're just not able to pay everyone with a salary cap and everything. So obviously, I think Javon Hargrave is a huge loss, and it wasn't really the most ideal thing to see him go to San Francisco, who's obviously a major contender in the NFC along with the Eagles. And then he joins a team that has a very good defensive line too. So I think it's a great pickup for San Francisco. But obviously the Eagles were not going to be able to pay him the price that San Francisco was willing to give him. So that's why everything ended up happening to them. But Javon is a great player who will be missed. However, you do get Jalen Carter to come in and take his place. So I think that was a huge win for the Eagles at the draft, where you have all these off-field things going on with Jalen Carter, and even the father of the young man that was killed like in the car crashes and stuff, suing Jalen Carter, waiting until after he signs the NFL contract to do that. I'm not gonna get majorly into that, but
40 total.
You guys see where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna get into all that. I'm just gonna keep this strictly football related. But the guy was one of the best players of the draft. And before any of these situations happened, what was everyone saying? Oh, Jalen Carter's great. He's one of the greatest players of the draft. You got to draft him in the top 5. Some mocks had him even with the number 1 pick before the Bears traded the pick. They were saying, oh, the Chicago Bears are going to take Jalen Carter. He's going to be a huge piece for the defense. He ends up with the Philadelphia Eagles. He ends up with a team that has a great culture in place. He ends up with a place that has great veterans around him that can kind of help him with his off the field situations, kind of coach him up a little bit, kind of like be a role model, show him this is the culture, what the Eagles like to do. This is what we're going to do. We're not going to be involved in any of this other crap because it's not really accepted here. Guys like Brandon Graham, guys like Fletcher Cox, guys like Josh Sweat that's been here for a few years now, and they know how everything kind of works. I think having guys like that in place is going to be very good for Jalen Carter. And not to mention that this guy's skill set and his athletic ability is outstanding. And I think that with him coming along, it's going to be great for the team. Not to mention the Georgia Bulldog takeover that's happening. You have all these players from Georgia. You have Nakobe and Jordan Davis that got drafted from last year. You got Nolan Smith drafted this year, and Jalen Carter and Ringo in the 3rd, 4th round. So they're bringing in all these Bulldogs. And DeAndre Swift, former Georgia Bulldog. So at this point, it's just getting crazy with the Georgia stuff. I mean, it's like Georgia Bulldogs practice. That's pretty much like an Eagles junior training camp or whatever you want to say, because somebody from Georgia is coming to the Eagles next year. But that's the main thing. That's the main one I wanted to focus on, because I think that getting a guy like almost said Jordan Davis, but Jalen Carter, getting that guy when he was supposed to be like top 5 pick, I think it's a huge win for the Eagles. And you didn't really have to give up anything to move up from 10 to 9 to get him. So I think it's awesome stuff. I think the Eagles defensive line is going to be just as much as a problem as we've ever seen it.
I mean, it's it's very substantial of how much Jalen Carter means as a piece of the defense. And yes, yeah, Bacon, absolutely.
We will definitely be getting into that, I'm sure.
Yeah, he absolutely. He and his agent, but he
had an interview, I think, with and since we're on the topic, you saw the interview with Kay Adams. He said that he felt betrayed or whatever by Howie Roseman. So I'm just going to leave that there. But Lindy, go ahead.
The money was on the table. You didn't take it, buddy. Sorry. That's your problem. But no, I love the fact that we're gonna have situations where it's Georgia versus Bama at practice, and
No.
a nice little nugget to note that Drew Rosenhaus is Jalen Carter's agent in terms of representation. Um, and Drew is one of the top most respected agents in all of the NFL. The player representation that he has, Tyreek Hill, Tyreek Hill, Darren Waller, Devondre Campbell, Aaron Jones.
That's a
Uh,
loaded lineup right there.
and it just keeps going. Chris Olave, Gus Edwards, Caleb Farley, Connor Williams.
Mm-hmm.
To name Philadelphia Eagles specifically, Javon Hargrave, who is now in San Francisco. Big Play Slay represented by him. Guys from our former Super Bowl team, Torrey Smith and Jay Ajayi, were all represented by Drew Rosenhaus. So I have to imagine, and it has been said that Drew he definitely put in his input of the situation with Jalen Carter going to Philly, and Dolamy says, saying in a way that you're going to be in one of the best NFL cultures for the type of people he needs around him, the type of coaching he needs, and what the Eagles did to accommodate for that. How many Bulldog teammates he has now on the Eagles, bringing up Nolan Smith, Keely Ringo, and snatching him, trading up to get him in the fourth round. We already had Jordan Davis and N'Kobe Dean there, and then just the additions of you know players in the NFL having that affiliation with Georgia and going there. You mentioned DeAndre Swift, who is also a Philadelphia native, so he gets to come home and play for his hometown team. You already saw what that did for Hassan Reddick and the amount of spark that it put in him, and how he kicked what last year. I mean, it's almost hard to put into words how um, extraordinary of a culture change the Eagles have had. And again, we keep bringing up that 2020 debacle and everything that was attached to it. But to make this kind of turnaround and to appear in two Super Bowls and win one in 5 years, that that's not built off of players alone. You need to have a culture of guys that just have that tough grit and hunger to win. It's it's addicting. It's addicting to watch Eagles. It's addicting to watch Eagles football again. But that's probably a tangent off of what we're talking about. But
Let's get
again,
into let's get
yeah,
more into the CJ situation, because I would say that
there we go.
when all this stuff was going on and we're going to free agency, we were all sitting here kind of like, okay, we gotta keep CJ on the team.
Yep,
CJ is a major piece for our team last year. He was still tied for the league lead of interceptions, even though he missed multiple games injured. He brought swagger. He brought a lot of good things for the Eagles defense.
plenty tough.
But
Yeah,
this dude became the clown of the free agency because he was offered a contract, multi-year contract. He didn't think it was good enough. He saw what Jesse Bates got with Atlanta Falcons, and he was like, "Oh, I want that. I want 16 million a year. I want 17 million a year, whatever the case may be." And the Eagles were like, "We can't do that. This is what we can do." And then he ends up signing a prove-it deal with the Detroit Lions. And even though the team pivoted from CJ and moved on to James Bradbury, which was a smart move by them because let's face it, everyone is going to say stuff about, the holding penalty in the Super Bowl, but James had a good season last year, man. James was a huge if CJ was a good addition, then you would have to say the same about James. So you can't blame them for moving to re-sign James when CJ is doing this stuff. That's what any smart team, I think, would have done. So they pivoted that, and even though after they did that, they still came back to CJ and said, let's try to work something out. What do we got to do? And then it just didn't happen, man. And all the stuff that he does, he goes on Twitter and he tweets stuff, cryptic tweets and stuff, taking shots at the Eagles, and he deletes them like 5 seconds later. I can't even remember how many deleted tweets that I saw. Like, I didn't even see the tweets from his page. I just saw it when someone posted something, and on the screenshot it said, this tweet has been deleted. Like, he's been deleting all these tweets, man. He's been deleting more tweets than tackles and stuff that he had last year. So it's crazy. And now he goes on to Kay Adams' podcast or whatever and saying that Howie Roseman betrayed him and the organizations that he was with betrayed him. Like, come on, bro. Like, how can you say this is betrayal when you pretty much screwed yourself? So that's my thoughts on it. What about you?
What a muff job by his agent too.
You should fire him.
Both terribly fumbled.
The guy should get fired.
That was god awful. That was god awful. But no, I mean, as a side note to your point about James Bradbury and the importance of that one, I mean, we talked about for how many years to where the Eagles were only able to maintain somewhat of a legitimate CB1 and couldn't really fill the void of CB2. And now you understand how important it is for those positions to complement each other well enough in that system. And then you just witnessed how well Slay and Bradbury covered their respected sides. I mean, it was great, but again, that's a product of the entire defensive unit as a whole. And but you got to have Pro Bowl caliber guys in that secondary to, let the quarterback know you're not about to test us today. We're going to make you pay for it. And both of those guys were on that level. But
yeah.
and then ironically enough, we watch CJ leave. He goes to Detroit, and we thought that, well, okay, they had a great turnaround under Mr. Bite Your Kneecaps Off Dan Campbell, and but then we get to the draft and we watch what the Lions did in the draft. So now you have CJ Gardner-Johnson paired up on occasion with Brian Branch. So I'm like, yeah, sure. Okay on that one. Because that was a player that I really
And
wanted.
Detroit does not
Brian
have
Branch, but
Detroit does not really have a pass rush like what the Eagles have. So we'll
outside
have
of
to see
Aiden
if he's able to
Hutchinson,
get all these interceptions because there's a lot of rushed passes. I'm not trying to take credit away from CJ for getting an interception, man, but I'm just telling you, if you're a secondary player and you got Hassan Reddick coming off the edge, 16 sacks in the regular season last year. You got multiple guys on the team, like pretty much everyone. Josh Sweat, Hargrave, Brandon Graham. These guys all had double-digit sacks, and they were all causing problems and making the secondary life easier, which is usually how it goes. Even if the year the Eagles won the Super Bowl, they had Jalen Mills and Ronald Darby, for God's sake. But These guys were
Our only
getting
saving grace
interceptions.
was Malcolm Jenkins.
They were getting interceptions because the pass rush was insane. So you don't know what you have until it's gone. I don't think that Detroit is going to reach the expectations. I see a lot of people are hyping this team and picking them as favorites of the NFC North, but I just don't know. When you see the Lions, is this a team throughout their history you can look at and say, yes, this team knows how to handle expectations? You can count on the Lions. No, you can count on the Lions to screw stuff up. So I think when it comes down to it, I think CJ's he's gonna wish he stayed with Philadelphia.
I think for Detroit, there's a lot riding on uh, the shoulders of the fact of their key players just have to stay healthy. You look at Amon-Ra St. Brown, who had a couple of nagging injuries last year. The guy, DeAndre Swift, who we recently picked up, has been on and off of the field due to injury. And then they replace him with Jahmyr Gibbs. And you look at Jared
I think
Goff
they
had,
drafted Gibbs way too high. They drafted him with a 12th pick. I think he would have been there later in the draft.
yeah, to each
I
their
really
own.
think
To
so.
each their own. Um, and then you look at, Jared Goff quietly had a pretty darn good year that, kind of, mirrored or gave you flashes of his Rams days, more so back in 2017, but that team was absolutely loaded. So I do think they have a good amount going for them right now, but they just need to put the necessary pieces together. Their playmakers have to stay healthy, so we'll see what happens. But man, I don't know why CJ imploded the way he did. I mean, you're just continuing to stretch it, man. And I go back to what he was saying on Twitter about Jonathan Gannon and, oh, you didn't put us in position to make plays, and all of us commending him and, rah cheering him on for saying that. Does that really mean anything anymore now that you're on the other side? So, no, but
It's a tough one, man.
just shh, go have your fun in Detroit. You think what you want, but we know exactly what happened. We know what you did and your agent did by fumbling the bag.
Fumbling the bag.
That's so bad. That was so bad. That day was so comical. That day was so comical. And yeah, Observer, that is a good point. Sidney Brown in the third round. I know there's a lot of people that aren't necessarily very high on him. And, they talk about Sidney's height being an issue. But it's not for a talent comparison, but, Brian Dawkins wasn't the tallest safety. Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu is not the tallest safety. And, again, completely different spectrums of talent. But, if you think that height's going to be an issue, history has already told you, it's more, I think it's more about the talent of the player than necessarily their measurables. But, a lot of these guys that we drafted are coming into an excellent program, and I'm excited for them.
Well, that's stuff to be excited about for the Eagles season, but that is about all that we have time for tonight on the LinkedIn podcast. We'll be back next Friday at the same time, 7 p.m., doing the doubleheader, doing the 7 p.m. LinkedIn and then 8 p.m. Gauntlet. So make sure you guys stay tuned for the upcoming show. But anyway, man,
too much to catch up on.
Way too much, man.
Too much to catch up on.
So,
our episode counter had to go back to 0 because we had how many episodes we had.
I actually lost count, but
yeah.
Here we go. Let's let the people know where you can find you, Lindy, before we get out of here tonight.
Well, I mean, like I said, unfortunately, I wish I was still, I wish I was still doing content.
Uh oh. Well, I think Lindy's internet or something went out. Oh no, he's back. So Lindy, what were you saying?
I was moving my keyboard forward and I accidentally hit one of the F keys. I probably hit
Uh oh.
F5, but you know, not Brock Lesnar's F5, but no, no. Like I was saying, you could find my YouTube channel, Lindy Endzone, where
Hmm.
yeah, again, I'm not doing content anymore, and I'll probably just advertise myself as the other half of the LinkedIn podcast. But I'm always on Twitter, always checking about the Eagles and all that. So I mean, in terms of finding me, this would be the most dominant place.
Absolutely, guys. So we will be seeing you next Friday for another episode of LinkedIn. All of us here with Sideline Sports. We will see you next time.